This morning, I read a very interesting article on The Athletic written by Darnell Mayberry, who covers the Chicago Bulls. It's a very short article where he interviews DeMar DeRozan and asks him whether or not DeMar DeRozan thinks he should shoot more three-pointers. And here was DeMar DeRozan's response. "I don't have to do nothing. 30 people scored more points than me in NBA history. I'm not sitting up here saying I don't need to shoot threes, but with that, I don't make it feel like I gotta go out every single night and shoot 10 threes. I don't feel that way. I still try to stay within the confines of being great at what I'm great at. When it's threes there, I take them. It's not like I don't take them." Now, if you're a Chicago Bulls fan and you hear that, you're probably not very happy because the Chicago Bulls last year were dead last in the NBA in three-point attempts per game. And despite having a top 10 defense, it was their offense most of the time that couldn't come through when they needed points. But I dove into the numbers a little bit because I've been making basketball content, for 5-6 years now. And when I first started making content, this was already a point of discussion with DeRozan when he was still back in Toronto. So we've had this discussion every single year of whether or not DeMar DeRozan should take more three-pointers. So I dove into some of the numbers behind DeMar DeRozan's games, specifically his offensive efficiency in different areas of the court. To nobody's surprise, DeMar DeRozan has led the NBA in mid-range attempts for pretty much his entire career. If we go to cleaningtheglass.com and the numbers that are colored are his percentile ranks, and we can see for him that for the percentage of shot attempts that come from the mid-range area, DeMar DeRozan has been, that's a 100th percentile, meaning he's taken more mid-range attempts than anybody else in the NBA for the past 5 years. And he also has the efficiency to back it up. DeMar DeRozan in the past 4 years has shot 47%, 48%, 49%, and then 48% again from the mid-range area, which ranks 88th, 90th, 88th, 84th percentile in the NBA. So not only does he lead the league in terms of volume, he is also in the top 20th percentile in the NBA in terms of shooting efficiency. But we also know in the NBA that mid-range attempts, specifically long mid-range attempts, are the least efficient shot in the NBA. Because if you take a step back, you have a chance at scoring 3 points instead of just 2. But the problem is that DeMar DeRozan has never been a good three-point shooter. I mean, this is obvious to anybody that has watched him play or that has ever looked up his basketball reference page. But just to reinforce that point, DeMar DeRozan is a career 29% three-point shooter. His best year as a three-point shooter came the year before last year, I guess in the 21-22 season, when he shot 35% on a little bit less than 2 attempts per game. But this past year on the same number of attempts, he dipped about 3 percentage points back down to 32%. There are 2 outlier seasons in his career in terms of his three-point shooting frequency. 1 year in 2014 where he attempted 2.7 per game, and 1 year in 2018 where he attempted 3.6 per game. And both those years he shot 30.5% and 31.0% respectively. So we simply do not have any evidence that DeMar DeRozan can shoot three-pointers efficiently with any kind of volume. Now, if you want to blame that on him refusing to improve his three-point shot in the offseason and not working hard towards that area, that's fine. But given the fact that DeMar DeRozan is proven to be so good at what he does, which is shooting mid-range jumpers, and has proven to be quite bad at what people want him to do in shooting three-pointers, it doesn't really make sense to me why people are begging him to shoot more threes and why people have been doing so for his entire career. And mathematically, it doesn't really work out either. So again, if we go back to his shooting accuracy statistics and we look at his field goal percentage from the long mid-range area, so oftentimes when people talk about DeMar DeRozan shooting more threes, they're asking him to cut out his long mid-range attempts and replace them with three-point attempts. So if you look at his field goal percentage from the long mid-range area, according to cleaningtheglass.com, the past 4 years, he's been 45%, 49%, 46%, and 46%. Let's just call it 46% on average. DeRozan, like we said, is a career 29% three-point shooter. So if you imagine him only taking three-pointers based on that efficiency versus only taking long mid-range jumpers from that same efficiency, he's actually more efficient on a points per possession base shooting long mid-range jumpers than he is shooting 29% from three. Now, if heading into this next season, he, through improvement, through getting more used to it, can improve himself to become closer to a 32, 33, 34% three-point shooter, that's when I think, at least mathematically, you can start having a deeper conversation about, okay, should DeMar DeRozan actually cut out some of these long mid-range attempts and shoot threes from them? But of course, what statistics often miss is that not all mid-range attempts and not all three-point attempts are created equally. I mean, it's not like DeMar DeRozan is catching balls wide open on the three-point line and choosing to take one dribble in and shoot a mid-range jumper. I'm sure that's happened before on a few occasions, but more often than not, he's creating off the dribble. He's taking tough shots at the end of the shot clock. What also gets lost in this conversation is that DeMar DeRozan is one of the best in the league at drawing shooting fouls. So we also have data on this as well. DeMar DeRozan's shooting foul percentage, which simply calculates on what percentage of a player's shot attempts was he fouled on. DeMar DeRozan, that's a lot of 90s. He's been essentially at the top of the league in terms of how often he draws fouls on his shot attempts. And when you break down his film, you'll see how he draws a lot of those fouls. It's a lot of those pump fake, bump into the guy, midair moves, the stuff that Dwayne Wade was really good at towards the end of his career. And a lot of that stuff happens in the mid-range. When you've got a guy isolated, it's much harder to do stuff like that shooting three-pointers. And I want to make it clear that DeMar DeRozan is absolutely a unique case here. He's a unique case. There are not many players like him in the NBA in this era. So yes, we do generally want to encourage a player to shoot more threes, but only when they've proven that they are not a great mid-range shooter and when they've proven that they can be at least an average or decent three-point shooter. And DeMar DeRozan is just the opposite of that. He is both a high-volume, high-efficiency mid-range shooter and a low-volume, low-efficiency three-point shooter. He's just a unicorn. Now, where I do dial back my thesis a little bit, where I do, see the frustration of Bulls fans is that when you break down DeMar DeRozan's film, there are some instances of him over dribbling, of him taking mid-range shots that are not good, that are early in the shot clock, of him, missing teammates for open three-pointers. Now, in that same article, I will read you guys the other quotes that DeMar DeRozan gave, which were a lot more cooperative and a lot more optimistic about him shooting more threes, although I will warn you, I do remember hearing DeMar DeRozan say these exact same words in his years in Toronto as well as in his years in San Antonio. So just because DeMar DeRozan says he'll shoot more threes does not mean he will shoot more threes, but at least he is saying it. Next year, it'll be more frequent threes from me without a doubt. Just because I've always had this vision in my career as I got older, I want to be able to just continue to expand my game. And that's a main priority and a point of focus for me to just capitalize on as I get older. And if there's one thing that can prompt a real change in DeMar DeRozan's game as an offensive player, it is probably age. DeMar DeRozan is 34 years old by now, and he's played a lot of minutes in the NBA, and he has not had any big injury. So even though he's played a ton of minutes in the NBA, he's probably a little bit better off than most 34-year-olds just because he seems to have just an Iron Man body. And especially with wing players as they get older and older, one of the biggest drop-offs we see in their efficiency comes from their efficiency at the rim. They just don't have the same vertical or strength or burst that they used to have during their prime. And also as DeMar DeRozan gets older and as the Bulls hopefully get better younger players into their system and they start improving, DeMar DeRozan should play a little more off ball. And that'll mean more catch and shoot opportunities, which means more three-point opportunities as well. To me, at this point, it is still a matter of DeMar DeRozan knowing that he is still really good at what he does, knowing that this is the path to him averaging 20 points per game, and in the environment that he's in on this Chicago Bulls team, they need DeMar DeRozan's shot creation. And if you're going to ask DeMar DeRozan to fill in that role, you have to ask him to do it in a way that plays to his strengths. You cannot ask him to both be your lead scorer, your primary playmaker, and also ask him to change his game and become more of a three-point shooter. It just doesn't work that way. But yeah, that's basically what I wanted to cover. I read this headline. I've been reading about this stuff for so many years in a row now, and I just wanted to dive into the numbers a little bit. And this is why every NBA player is unique, and sometimes there are exceptions.